Archaeology is a pretty incredible field of science that has always captured the imagination and curiosity of people around the world. From Stonehenge to the legendary lost city of Troy, these discoveries tell us a great deal about the people who came thousands of years before us. They show us how they lived, what they believed, how they survived, and sometimes even how they died. But some archaeological discoveries don't answer these questions, they raise new ones. On the island of Flores, scientists found a tiny human species that proved the Hobbits weren't entirely fiction. In Romania, 3 small clay tablets challenged everything we thought we knew about the origins of writing. And across the United States, reports of giant skeletons beneath ancient mounds have refused to disappear for more than a century. These aren't man-made tales or mythical legends, these are real archaeological discoveries that left experts speechless. Number 15. The Smithsonian Massive Skeletons newspapers from the 1800s loved strange discoveries. But one story has refused to fade with time. Again and again, local papers across the United States reported that workers digging into ancient burial mounds had discovered giant human skeletons. A few described people standing 7 or even 8 feet tall. Others mentioned unusually thick skulls or double rows of teeth. Whether every report was accurate is another matter, but they appeared often enough to leave people thinking what was really being found. As more of these mounds were excavated, many artifacts and human remains were collected and sent to museums for study, including the Smithsonian Institution. And that's where the mystery took on a life of its own. Over the years, stories began spreading that giant skeletons had vanished after arriving in Washington. The Smithsonian has denied hiding or destroying evidence, while historians argue that many 19th-century newspaper accounts mixed facts with exaggeration. Still, one question keeps coming back. Why did so many communities, separated by hundreds of miles, report discoveries that sounded so oddly alike? Number 14. The Father Crespi's strange artifact collection. Well, this man was one of those people whose life became far stranger than anyone could have imagined. When Italian missionary Father Carlo arrived in Ecuador during the 1920s, he wasn't searching for lost civilizations or forgotten treasures. He was there to help local communities. Over the years, many indigenous families began bringing him unusual objects they said had come from caves and underground passages deep in the Andes. Before long, his church courtyard was overflowing with thousands of artifacts. There were clay figures, stone carvings, and most famously, large metal plates covered with odd images and symbols. Some appeared to show animals, pyramids, stars, and markings that visitors claimed looked surprisingly similar to writing from the ancient Middle East. Whether those similarities were real or a coincidence has remained a matter of debate ever since. But then, everything changed. A fire damaged much of the collection in 1962 and after Father Crespi's death in 1982. Many surviving pieces were transferred to museums and government collections in Ecuador. Some artifacts can still be seen today, while others seem to have disappeared from public view. That has kept one question alive for decades. What exactly did Father Crespi really have in his collection? Number 13. Homo floresiensis, the real-life hobbits. When scientists announced the discovery of a tiny human species on the Indonesian island of Flores in 2003, people immediately started calling them hobbits. The nickname stuck, but the fossils raised a far bigger question than their size ever did. Standing only about 3.5 feet tall, Homo floresiensis lived until roughly 54,000 years ago. At first, many experts believed they were simply descendants of Homo erectus, an ancient human species already known from the region. That explanation seemed reasonable until scientists examined more than just the skull. A later study compared the shoulders, arms, legs, wrists, feet, and teeth with those of other early human relatives. Instead of looking more modern, the fossils appeared to share surprisingly ancient features, closer to much earlier members of the human family than anyone expected. That discovery complicated the evolutionary picture and sparked a debate that still continues today. So where did these tiny humans really come from? Were they an isolated branch that evolved on Flores, or survivors of a much older human lineage that history never expected to find? Number 12. The Trutria tablets, older than Sumer. Every history book points in the same direction when the subject of writing comes up: ancient Mesopotamia. But a tiny village in Romania has been arguing with that story for more than 60 years. In 1961, archaeologist Nicolae Vlasa was excavating the Neolithic settlement of Tritria when his team found a ritual grave unlike the others. Beside the remains were 3 small clay tablets, along with stone tools, clay figures, and shell ornaments. They weren't unique because of their size. They fit comfortably in the palm of a hand. What caught everyone's attention were the carefully arranged symbols carved across their surfaces. They looked intentional, almost as though someone expected another person to understand them. Radiocarbon dating placed the burial at around 5500 BC, well before the earliest accepted writing from Sumer. And that's why these little tablets still divide archaeologists and historians today. Were they actually the first written words ever recorded by human hands? Or have we been looking at them the wrong way? Number 11. The ancient Iranian vase with animation. Well, movies changed the world, but they certainly didn't invent animation. We mean, believe it or not, people were already making pictures move almost 5,000 years ago. Archaeologists realized this after studying a clay goblet discovered at Shah-e-Sukte, the burnt city of ancient Iran. Wrapped around its surface are 5 carefully painted scenes of a Persian ibex. In one, it stands quietly. In the next, it walks forward. Then it rises onto its back legs until it finally reaches the branches of a tree. If you give the goblet a quick spin, those separate paintings suddenly blend into a moving scene. It's surprisingly close to the same principle used in modern animation. Strangely enough, when the vessel was excavated during the 1970s, almost no one noticed what the artist had done. Many years passed before someone looked closely enough to realize the images weren't random decoration at all. They had been arranged to create motion. Considering this was made thousands of years before paper, photography, or film, it's hard not to wonder what else that mighty civilization understood long before we gave them credit for it. Number 10. The Golan structure. The mysterious stone circles have always meant something to ancient people. The question is, what did these ones mean? The mystery sits on the Golan Heights, where a series of enormous stone rings remained unnoticed until aerial surveys carried out after 1967 revealed their true shape. From the ground, they look like scattered piles of dark basalt. Seen from above, they form 5 giant circles wrapped around one another, stretching nearly 500 feet across. Archaeologists later dated the monument to around 3500 BC, making it roughly the same age as Stonehenge. More than 40,000 tons of basalt were stacked to create the structure. Yet nobody can say with confidence who organized such an enormous project or why they chose this lonely hilltop. At its center lies a large burial chamber, but that's only part of the story. Openings in the stone rings line up with the sunrise during the summer and winter solstices, hinting that the site may also have served as an ancient observatory. Thousands of years have passed since the first stones were laid, but the people responsible left behind no names, written records, or any explanation. Number 9. The man with a stone-tongue death usually ends a story. For one man buried in Roman Britain, it seems to have begun one instead. Archaeologists made this find in 1991 while excavating a cemetery in Northamptonshire dating to the 3rd or 4th century. 35 graves were found, but only this one stopped everyone in their tracks. This man was buried face down, which is already unusual by Roman standards. Then, the team examined his skull. His tongue had been cut out before death or shortly afterward. In its place sat a flat stone carefully pushed inside his mouth. nothing quite like it had ever been recorded in Roman archaeology. Evidence on the jaw showed the tongue had been deliberately removed, but the reason vanished with the people who buried him. Was it punishment? A ritual? Or was the stone placed there to silence him forever, even after death? Other graves from Roman Britain contain stones or pottery replacing missing body parts, but this remains one of the strangest examples ever found, and one that experts still struggle to explain. Number 8. The Sajama mummies. The dead that don't decay people usually think of Egypt when the word mummy comes up. Bolivia is probably the last place they'd expect. But one of the most amazing collections of naturally preserved human mummies was discovered on the slopes of Mount Sajama, the country's highest volcano. The story reached the outside world in 1939, when two Austrian climbers noticed small stone towers standing high above the Altiplano. Curiosity got the better of them, so they looked inside. Wrapped in finely woven textiles were human bodies so well preserved that their skin, hair, clothing, and even parts of their facial features had survived almost 1,000 years. The secret wasn't a complicated embalming process. Nature had done all the work. Freezing nights, dry mountain winds, and thin air created the perfect conditions to preserve the dead. Later studies showed many of the mummies belonged to pre-Inca Aymara communities that buried their relatives inside chulpas, stone tombs built to honor important ancestors rather than hide them away. These weren't forgotten graves. They were places families returned to for centuries. Number 7. The Alaska bronze artifact trade between Asia and North America sounds like something that belongs in a history book about ships and empires. But a tiny piece of bronze buried in Alaska suggests people may have been exchanging objects across the Bering Strait long before anyone expected. The discovery happened in 2011 while experts from the University of Colorado were studying climate change near Cape Espenberg. Instead of weather clues, they uncovered a small bronze object inside a 1,000-year-old Inuit house. It looked like part of a belt buckle, complete with a broken ring, a rectangular frame, and even a strip of leather still attached. The leather was radiocarbon dated to around AD 600, but the metal itself may be much older. That instantly created a problem. Ancient Alaskan cultures never made cast bronze. Somebody had to bring it there. Most archaeologists believe it was made somewhere in East Asia before changing hands through generations of trade. But one mystery refuses to disappear. No one can say with confidence what the object originally belonged to or why someone carried it thousands of miles into the Arctic. Number 6. The legendary sanctuary of Odysseus. For almost 3,000 years, Odysseus lived where most heroes belong, inside the pages of a story. Then archaeologists working on the Greek island of Ithaca uncovered something they weren't expecting. The site had been known for many years as the School of Homer, but new excavations revealed clear signs that people once came there to honor Odysseus himself. Archaeologists found bronze offerings, pottery, and, most importantly, part of a roof tile carrying an ancient Greek inscription that mentions his name. That discovery changed the conversation. The sanctuary sits on a ridge overlooking the sea, a fitting place for the hero whose life was defined by dangerous voyages across the Mediterranean. At its center stood an altar where sacrifices were once offered by visitors who believed Odysseus deserved worship alongside other legendary figures. So, does that prove every event in the Odyssey really happened? Number 5. Assyrian reliefs of winged genii. Well, many ancient civilizations filled their walls with kings and queens. The Assyrians chose something far stranger. When explorers found the buried palaces of Nimrud and Khorsabad during the 19th century, they found enormous stone figures standing guard along the walls and doorways. Each one towered over visitors at nearly 9 feet tall. They had the faces of men, powerful wings rising from their backs, long curled beards, and robes carved so finely that every strand and fold still stands out almost 3,000 years later. Look a little closer, and another mystery appears. Many of them carry a tiny bucket in one hand and what looks like a pine cone in the other. Historians believe these figures represent the Apkallu, legendary sages sent by the gods to teach humanity writing, farming, medicine, and wisdom before the Great Flood. The pine cone and bucket may have played a role in sacred purification rituals, but nobody can say for certain. Whether they were symbolic guardians or memories of beings the Assyrians believed had once walked beside them. The reliefs continue to leave people asking the same question: why were they considered so important that entire palaces were built under their watch? Number 4. Vanished Nabatean caravan towns. Whenever the Nabateans are mentioned, Petra is almost always the first place that comes to mind. But Petra was never standing alone. Far beyond its towering sandstone cliffs, dozens of Nabatean towns, caravan stations, and desert forts once stretched across what are now Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and southern Syria. Many of them are little more than faint outlines today, half buried beneath drifting sand and slowly disappearing into the landscape that once made them rich. Beginning around the 4th century BC, the Nabateans built a trading empire that carried frankincense, spices, and silk across the Arabian desert. Their settlements survived because they mastered something far more valuable than gold: water. They carved reservoirs, cisterns, and channels into solid rock, turning some of the driest land on Earth into thriving stops for thousands of caravans. Then, within only a few decades after the Roman annexation in AD 106, many of these towns fell silent. Even now, archaeologists continue finding forgotten roads and settlements, trying to understand how an entire desert civilization could almost vanish from history. Number 3. The ancient cart ruts of Malta. If you drive across the islands of Malta and Gozo, you'll sooner or later come across something that doesn't seem to belong. Deep grooves cut through the limestone run side by side for miles, crossing fields, climbing hills, and sometimes ending where the sea begins. Now, at first, the explanation sounded simple. Ancient carts wore the tracks into the rock over hundreds of years. But standing beside them makes that idea harder to accept. In places, the grooves sink almost 2 feet into solid limestone, and many twist, split, or suddenly merge again like railway lines. Others head straight toward the Mediterranean before disappearing beneath the water. That's where the mystery becomes even harder to ignore. If those underwater tracks were carved before sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, they could be far older than anyone expected. But no one on Earth has been able to explain who made them, what kind of vehicles used them, or why no similar network exists anywhere else quite like it. What's your take on it? Number 2. Nazlet Khader skeleton. Africa's oldest burials long before Egypt became the land of pyramids and pharaohs, another story was already unfolding along the Nile. It wasn't written on temple walls or carved into stone. It was buried beneath the ground, waiting tens of thousands of years for someone to find it. That moment came in 1980 when archaeologists working near Nazlet Khader in Upper Egypt found the grave of a young man. They did radiocarbon dating, and the results placed the burial at roughly 35 to 40,000 years old, making it one of the oldest known intentional burials of a modern human ever discovered in Africa. Beside him were carefully crafted flint tools, including a finely worked stone axe, suggesting they weren't placed there by accident, but as part of a deliberate farewell. The skeleton told another story as well. His arms and shoulders carried signs of years of heavy labor, probably from cutting stone at nearby quarry sites, while the shape of his skull still preserved a few features linking him to much older human ancestors. That combination caught scientists by surprise. He looked human, but carried echoes of an earlier chapter in our evolution. Number 1. The Tiger of Yarim Tepe. This man was one of those people whose work has outlived his name. More than 5,000 years ago, someone sat down with nothing more than a lump of clay and shaped a tiger by hand. That tiny figure eventually turned up at Yarim Tepe in Iran, where archaeologists found it buried after thousands of years beneath the earth. Time wore away parts of it, but not enough to hide the careful stripes, the powerful body, or the unmistakable animal the artist wanted people to recognize. What makes this little sculpture so strange isn't its age. It's what came after it. For thousands of years, almost nothing similar appears anywhere nearby. It's as though the story behind it disappeared while the figure itself survived. Was it made for protection, ritual, or a forgotten legend? Well, the answers vanished with the person who created it. Well, that's all from us. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.